You're listening to GWP Live. I'm your host, Isaac Hedges, joined once again by co-host Jacob Bulmer. We are live with winter weather updates as things are developing. Some very interesting recent developments indeed throughout the day from what I've heard. Jake, what exactly are we looking at in terms of this winter weather cycle?
Yeah, so again, we've still got that upcoming winter storm coming in this coming weekend. We've got one more day where we're going to be kind of near average for those temperatures, maybe even slightly above average. So that gives you one more day to get outside, get any last minute yard work that you need to done, or get anything tidied up before this winter storm, because you certainly may want to be prepared to not be able to safely get out of the house for a couple of days at the very least.
Absolutely, that'd be worth knowing, certainly in the possibility of this winter weather, a bit of precipitation coming our way. Again, not to say that that's definitely going to be the case, but it's certainly possible that you might be stuck in your home for a while. So it'd be important to start making those preparation in terms of whatever you need in your house, groceries, different things like that. It'd be important to take care of, get things all prepared before any potential storms. And Jake, in terms of that, it looks like chances of that have gone up a little bit throughout the day.
Yes, yeah, certainly they have. We've seen quite an increase on the potential for those snowfall totals between the different maps, and so we'll be showing you those. We've also had the expansion of these winter storm warnings. During yesterday's live report, we had winter storm watches that went up to the Oklahoma-Kansas border and the Arkansas-Missouri border, but those had not yet extended into Kansas and Missouri. And as you'll see now here, as we look at the National Weather Service National Alerts map here, we do have those winter storm watches across Kansas as well as now into Missouri and extending further towards the east. We've also seen the extension of those extreme cold watches. And so we've also got extreme cold watches into southern Texas, where we're expecting wind chills below zero, all the way into potentially all the way down to the Gulf Coast, is what we're looking at this point in time. We got winter storm watches across New Mexico, and again, those extend all the way into Virginia, and these will likely continue to be extended all the way into the East Coast here, where we're also looking at the possibility of over a foot of snow along the I-95 corridor. Washington, D.C. forecasting its biggest snowstorm in over 10 years.
Biggest snowstorm in over 10 years. Wow. In terms of precedent, of
Yes, it's
course,
verified.
yes. Wow. So, certainly in terms of precedent, of course, as we talked about yesterday here on GWP Live, and as we've talked a little bit about throughout the season, and certainly even in the past year, but beyond that, not a great deal about this. Of course, these cooling trends, whether it's further south than what you might expect. Again, we've talked about as far south as Florida, snow in Florida. Again, we see things going on down in Texas. Again, as you mentioned, these extreme cold warnings, so it's not totally unheard of. We saw something similar, of course, as we mentioned last year in the South, but again, still is somewhat shocking. Jake?
Yeah, certainly so. And so we're going to be looking at that possibility for the snow chances here across Missouri. I will say that since yesterday, overall, the models are trending a little bit further north, which means that we would have more substantial impacts this weekend than what we originally anticipated. Now, before we dive into that, I do want to give a reminder during this live stream. Of course, you can call in with questions, comments, or whatever it is that you want to kind of reference here on our live update here. And so you can do that calling 417-448-0819, and we will make sure to take those calls live on the air. You can also put questions down in the chat as well, and I will look at those and then we will go over those as well if you don't want to hear your voice on our live stream. So that is always an option as well. So let's go ahead and dive into things here. We're going to be looking at a few different models. We're not going to spend as much time on this because they're starting to become more in agreement as we're getting a little bit closer to the storm itself here. The European model has been very consistent the last 3 days now in a row that we will be dealing with snow across the state of Missouri. The GFS model, the American model, has been the one that's been a little bit hesitant to put any snow here across Kansas and Missouri. The European model, with the latest run, still putting in some snow across Kansas and Missouri. The positioning of that storm system is now going to be across northern Kansas, or excuse me, northern Oklahoma and southern Kansas, where yesterday the forecast was in Oklahoma. So even though the European model yesterday was a little bit on the more northern side, it is still tracking even a little bit further to the north. This means that cities that originally were going to be hit with heavy amounts of snow, like Little Rock, Memphis, and Nashville, are no longer expecting the snowfall, the potential that we were looking at yesterday. As far as timing goes, the first few light snow showers should move into western Missouri as early as 6 p.m. on Friday evening, with those winter storm watches beginning at 12 o'clock across Joplin and Nevada. Both Joplin and Nevada under those winter storm watches from Friday through Sunday morning. So that certainly is quite interesting that it begins on Friday, so a little bit earlier than what we originally thought. The other important thing about this is that the colder air is expected to move in several hours before the wintry weather is. And so that's part of the reason why we're very confident that Missouri is going to see all snow out of this event. Into the Interstate 44 corridor and points south, there could be a little bit of sleet and freezing rain mixed in, but north of Interstate 44, we are not anticipating that across west central Missouri, here in Nevada, as well as up into Columbia along Interstate 70 and points south.
Absolutely. So a few questions on that. And speaking of questions, of course, as we mentioned, I failed to mention at the top of the show, though, Jake, thank you for bringing that to our attention. If you've got any questions as to where exactly you are, how this weather is going to affect you in your area, what precautions you ought to take, anything of the sort, you can always call in and let us know what your question is, and we'll do our best to answer it. If you'd like to do that, the number is 417-448-0819. Again, that's 417-448-0819. Don't hesitate to reach out. Of course, last night we had quite a few people miss out on that opportunity, so don't miss out again. Time is ticking. So, Jake, again, a couple of questions on that. Of course, we talked a bit about this last night, and certainly at the top of the week, GWP News, the weather forecast we did there, in terms of what sort of precipitation to expect. Now, certainly we've talked about snow. Naturally, it was a bit blurrier, a bit foggier on what to expect earlier in the week, and that we've gotten closer to it. Those predictions have been fleshed out a bit more, so we've got a better idea, naturally, as we've gotten closer to it. So we know certainly the possibility of snow. What about other winter precipitation? Some of those really consequential things, different things like ice. Is that something we ought to be concerned about, Jake?
Not here in Missouri. I would not be concerned about freezing rain. I would say that we would have to go into Oklahoma and Arkansas in order to start to see that. Northern Texas will start off with rain, but then we'll switch over to ice. So if you are traveling across those southern central states, then you certainly have to be cautious of that. The potential for long-term power outages across this region is also likely, and that cold is going to stick around for several days, making things very dangerous on that front. But as far as you're traveling across Missouri, snow is going to be the biggest threat. We also know one big change since yesterday. Not only is the track appear to be quite a bit further to the north, but we also do know that it's going to come in a couple of different waves. The first wave is going to be Friday night into Saturday morning. That's when we could see light to moderate snow here across Missouri. Then we can have a bit of a lull in the morning hours on Saturday. But by Saturday afternoon and into Sunday night, or excuse me, Saturday night into Sunday morning, rather, that is where the heaviest snow is going to take place. The good news is the heaviest snowfall rates will likely stay across northern Arkansas and Oklahoma. That's the kind of snow that can reduce visibilities. Road crews can have a hard time keeping up with that, but we're not anticipating seeing any of that. But the winds will be a little bit on the stronger side, 10, 15, 20, gusting at times over 30 miles per hour. And so that by itself could certainly reduce visibilities. But again, as we mentioned, this is likely to come in several rounds, with the heaviest snow occurring Saturday night, but also a light to moderate band occurring Friday night. And that's where we're going to initially see some of that accumulation. Something else is the first about 3 hours that it shows snow on your radar, whatever radar you're looking at. Be aware that that might not actually be reaching the ground because there is a dry layer towards the surface. And so that column of the air that we look at, it has to be saturated. And so what that means is it has to be moist enough at the surface for the snow aloft to reach the ground. And so we're going to have to wait for that column to saturate in order to see any accumulations at the surface. And so that could take a few hours before we actually see any accumulations on the roadways as well.
Absolutely. So at this point, it would appear we are just days away here in Southwest Missouri, certainly from what could be our first snow of the year. Now, in terms of the worst of that, Jake, as you mentioned, of course, they'll be getting a fair bit more just south of us, interestingly, there in Arkansas. And again, not a lot of precipitation expected outside of possible snow there, certainly in terms of freezing rain. You said we don't expect a whole lot of that. So again, that sort of helps to balance things out. Of course, we covered this early in the week on Monday. GWP News, our weather segment. Certainly, we talked about this. There seems to be something in it for everyone. Of course, we missed out on that white Christmas, had an unusually warm one this year, so we are getting a bit of snow, perhaps a bit late. But that said, Jake, for better or for worse, it appears we won't have it for long, huh?
Yeah, certainly so. And so that was with the European model, and we can look at a couple of other models, but we won't look at these as closely tonight, uh, simply because we have already kind of, since there's a lot of similarities now that we're getting a little bit closer, there's still quite a few differences. This particular model shows that there could be a break in the action. So we could start off with some snow, and then that second band would be much heavier a little bit later. This particular model wants to show snow into Sunday afternoon. And so that's another possibility. It could linger throughout the day on Sunday as well. So that's one possibility. But overall, pretty similar between these two different models as far as storm track. Timing is a little bit different. Snowfall amounts very similar when we compare these models. The American model is still a little bit lighter on that snowfall across the state of Missouri, keeping accumulations a little bit further to the south. And so the GFS model shows a bit of a longer break. In fact, the American model in the latest run doesn't even appear to show that second round of snow moving in across Missouri, indicating that our snow may be done by the middle of the day on Saturday. And so that is why there's still quite a bit of uncertainty as far as how much snowfall we are going to see out of this system.
Absolutely. So certainly possible, Jake. I may have misheard you on this. You may have to correct me. Of course, you mentioned that one said the snow could be done with by midday Saturday. Now, if I recall correctly, on a previous model, you were looking at here again on GWP Live in this very edition. You said that it was looking more like we'd get more, perhaps the heaviest snow Saturday night into Sunday morning. Did I hear you incorrectly, or is that just a discrepancy between a couple of these models?
Yeah, that is one of the big differences right now. And so, of course, that will make a big difference um, in what we end up seeing there. Apologies for that technical difficulty that we had momentarily where your screen disappeared there, or my screen disappeared from your screen. But we now have that back up and running. And so, next thing that we'll look at here is so. Snowfall this season, of course, we talked about that very light, about half an inch here in Nevada, Columbia picking up a little bit more, which is still well below where we were at this time last year, as well as those averages. Um, We're also quite a bit behind if we are going to reach this forecast that I made back in November. As far as this storm system, of course, the further north you go for places like Columbia, it's going to be a little bit less. Right now, I'm going with about 2 to 4 inches. And then as you go further to the south in Nevada, about 3 to 6 inches on that snowfall. In fact, here's a quick little map that I kind of drew up here showing that snowfall forecast from Friday night through Sunday. This was updated as of this evening here. And obviously, there's no numbers here, but of course, the further to the south that you go, that's where you're going to have the heavier amounts here. Here in this yellow, that would represent anywhere from about 2 to 4 inches. That again includes Columbia. As you go to the north of Interstate 70, a little bit less than that. And then here across this lighter blue, tealish type color, I guess you could say, where Nevada is included in. So this goes across west central and central Missouri, about 3 to 6 inches here. Joplin forecasting about 4 to 8 in this pink area, and then this purple area is going to be anywhere from about 6 to 10 with isolated 12-inch totals. And so that's what I think we're looking at as of right now. Of course, these numbers will update as we get closer to the actual event.
Absolutely, certainly worth noting. And again, in terms of looking at this long term, or just what one might expect in terms of colder weather, in terms of snow, perhaps a little bit counterintuitive again as we go further south in Missouri, and for that matter, looking largely at it further south across the United States, we are seeing higher anticipated snowfall levels there. And one other thing mentioned, Jake, of course, earlier this week, GWP News or weather segment we did there. Another thing, naturally, along with the snow, part of the conditions that make for that, naturally, quite a bit colder. I believe you mentioned something along the lines of we'd see some of the coldest temperatures, some of the coldest air this year, just this coming week. Do I recall that correctly?
Yes, yeah, this will likely be the coldest air. Well, it will be the coldest air of the season, or at least so far, but it could be for the entire year overall as well. So we'll go ahead and it could get colder later this year, but I don't think it will. I think this will be our coldest Arctic air that we see all winter long. But it's definitely the coldest so far, but we'll have to see about the rest of this winter. It's looking that we'll have a couple more weeks of this cooler weather, and then we'll probably trend closer to where we were during Christmas around mid to late February. But as far as what we're dealing with in the short term here, again, one more mild day. Tomorrow, it's going to be really nice, 30s and 40s, relatively mild, we should say, relatively compared to where we're going to be at. But then as we go into Thursday night, that's when the Arctic air is going to move in. High temperatures, single digits, low teens on Friday night, and both Friday night and Saturday night and Sunday night, all three of those nights, low temperatures in the single digits. A few areas may even go just slightly below zero. Around -5 would be probably the lowest temperature that we would see. And that's going to continue all the way until Monday. We will likely have wind chills below zero for 72 hours straight. And so that is certainly going to be dangerous for any people and pets that are outdoors. And so make sure that you have minimal exposure when you have to go outside, that is.
Absolutely. So, just there, a lot of the essential information, certainly across Missouri, here in southwest Missouri, our regional area, in terms of what to expect, some of the winter weather coming our way throughout the week. And again, we've addressed a number of different components of that, but it's quite possible that we've missed something, or if we haven't hit on your area yet, you're still a bit in the dark as to what sort of winter weather to expect in your area. We haven't gotten to it yet. Well, you can do it. You can still do it. The time is ticking, however, though. If you'd like to have those questions answered as soon as possible, well, call in 417-448-0819. Again, that is 417-448-0819. Don't wait around because the time is ticking. Jake?
Yes, time is ticking. We're about 2 or 3 minutes out from the end of today's live stream, and we'll continue to provide updates as we get closer to the event. with those changes. And so the other big story, again, as we mentioned, is going to be the cold. Wind chills could be getting upwards of 20 degrees below zero at the coldest point of this event. And so that is going to be the danger. You also, and I guess that reminds me, you also need to be dripping your faucets beginning Thursday night. And best practice would be to drip faucets Thursday night all the way through Monday, because that is when temperatures are going to be below 20 degrees. Any night where the temperature is below 20 degrees, especially for a substantial amount of time, that is when at least one of those faucets needs to be dripped. And then again, you can also open the cabinet doors at your sinks as well. That's another really good safe practice. And could we lose power? It's very unlikely. If it gets super cold, it is certainly a possibility that that can happen for a couple of hours. And so I would also be prepared for that possibility. And the other thing is, once this snow falls, if the temperature does remain as cold as we think it will, that's not going to go anywhere. So that means that it's going to be on the roads for quite some time until the road crews are able to get out there and fix it. Now, how cold is this cold going to, or how long is this cold going to last? Um, you'll notice that temperatures will warm up just slightly as we go into Tuesday. Tuesday will most likely be our first day above freezing since the winter storm. But as we go into the middle and later part of next week, not as cold, but colder air is expected to return, with even more winter weather chances into the end of next week. But we will look more into that as we get closer to the event. But I believe that wraps up things here tonight on GWP Live.
Absolutely, and you'll want to stay tuned as always, of course, for more in-depth weather updates each week on GWP News Weekly. Those come out on Mondays, and certainly throughout the winter season, throughout the year. In the case of severe weather updates, certainly, of course, as we are here in the case of winter weather, well, you can find us here at GWP Live, delivering all of the latest information. Again, you can always submit any questions that you've got. And always submit those, and we'll take a look at them later, even if we didn't get to it in this very edition of GWP Live. So, not to fret, but you want to check that out. Though I do believe that concludes the latest coverage, the latest information we've got for now on your winter weather. So, until next time,
I'm Jacob Fulmer.
I'm Isaac Hedges, host of GWP Live. From all of us at GWP Live and Great World Productions, good night and God bless.